This piece of history was found by divers who are working on a documentary for the History Channel.
The ocean rolled gently beneath the research vessel as dawn colored the sky in pale streaks of gold. The crew stood silently on deck, their eyes fixed on the waves that hid the deepest point on Earth. Something was stirring in the Challenger deep, something that had remained silent for longer than humanity had existed. And today, the team was returning to find out why their instruments had detected a signature that defied explanation. The sea breeze ruffled the edges of the equipment cases lined across the deck, each one holding technology far more sensitive than anything used in previous dives. The new resonance sensors were capable of picking up frequencies through dense layers of rock and sediment. It was those sensors that first detected the pattern: steady, rhythmic, and disturbingly intentional. The divers knew they were about to face something no expedition had ever documented. Dr. Evelyn Mercer checked her tablet for the 100th time, watching the signature pulse steadily across the screen. She had spent decades studying the deep ocean, but nothing prepared her for this. The frequency wasn't geological. It wasn't biological. It wasn't even mechanical in any conventional sense. It carried structure, geometry, and resonance harmonics that suggested it was designed. On the far side of the deck, the dive team prepared the submersible. Their movements were calm but tense, every gesture precise as they secured cables, checked seals, and verified redundant life support systems. The submersible was one of the strongest deep-sea vehicles ever engineered, but even it was no match for whatever force had caused that signature to vibrate through the ocean floor. The sky brightened, though the sun seemed reluctant to rise. It cast a cold light across the water, shining off the steel hull. The hum of the instruments grew louder, as if reacting to the deep. Evelyn tried to shake off the unease growing inside her. Data didn't feel ominous, until today. As the last safety checks were completed, the captain approached Evelyn with a grim expression. Communication feeds from their seafloor sensors had glitched again. Brief bursts of static, then fragments of the signature repeating at higher frequencies. Something was escalating. Evelyn nodded, though her heartbeat quickened. They were descending at exactly the right time, or possibly the worst. The submersible was lowered into the water with a slow, deliberate descent. The divers climbed inside, sealing the hatch shut as waves splashed against the viewport. The deck crew watched until the sub slipped beneath the surface, its lights vanishing into the darkness. A haunting silence fell over the deck after it disappeared. Inside the sub, the divers adjusted their seats as the craft began its descent. Light faded almost immediately, replaced by a deep blue gloom. Tiny organisms glowed outside the viewport, their bioluminescent bodies swirling in the water like drifting constellations. Normally, the sight would have inspired awe, but today it made the divers feel as though they were being watched. The pressure increased with every passing meter. The hull groaned, not dangerously, but audibly, an ever-present reminder of the crushing weight surrounding them. The pilot monitored depth metrics while Evelyn studied the resonance data. The signature was strengthening the deeper they went. It felt like the source sensed their approach. At 2,000 meters, the first anomaly appeared. The water distortion sensors registered a field of unusual turbulence. It wasn't caused by currents. It wasn't caused by temperature shifts. It was as if something massive, invisible, was displacing the water around them. The pilots slowed their descent immediately. The distortion came into view as faint ripples shimmering in the water. The divers leaned forward, trying to understand what they were seeing. The ripple wasn't moving like water. It was behaving more like a fluctuating membrane. Evelyn frowned as the resonance mapper spiked. The signature was now branching into secondary harmonics. The sub drifted carefully through the distortion, and instantly every instrument flickered. Lights dimmed, cameras glitched, and temperature readings plummeted to near impossible lows. Then everything normalized as quickly as it had failed. The divers looked at each other in confusion and growing fear. The trench walls soon appeared on their left and right, towering, jagged cliffs of ancient rock. Their lights revealed formations that looked more like the ruins of colossal structures than natural geology. But they had no time to process such illusions. Something tapped against the hull, 3 sharp knocks in equal intervals. Everyone froze. The knocks came again, measured and deliberate. The pilot checked the sonar feed, but it showed nothing nearby. The water around them was empty. The knocks stopped, replaced by a low-frequency hum that vibrated through the metal floor. The divers whispered to each other, trying to calm the rising dread. They descended further, reaching depths where no organic life had ever been documented, yet bioluminescent creatures drifted alongside them, glowing faintly, drawn by something. Some of them formed spirals in the water, moving in synchronized patterns that resembled the very waveforms of the resonance signature. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Patterns did not occur by coincidence at 7 miles below the surface. The trench floor finally came into sight, stretching like an endless barren plain. Yet the resonance signal was now so strong it caused the monitors to shake. The sediment scanners activated automatically, projecting beams deep into the seabed. At first, the readings were meaningless. Then the impossible appeared. There was a hollow chamber beneath the trench floor, a perfectly spherical cavity, centimeters beneath the sediment layer. Its walls reflected the scanner beams in ways no natural formation could, and in the center of that cavity was the source of the signature. The pilot instinctively tried to pull the sub upward, but a strange current wrapped around the craft, gently tugging them downward. The divers shouted adjustments, but nothing responded. The sub was being guided. The plane below them shifted as the sediment swirled away in a circular motion, revealing a smooth surface made of dark metallic stone. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its edge, shapes Evelyn recognized only vaguely from anomalous research archives. The glowing increased as the sub approached. A massive, perfectly round opening, irised open at the center of the metallic surface. The pilot cursed under his breath. The sub was no longer descending under its own power. It was being lowered into the opening by forces unknown. They entered a vast, submerged cavern. The walls shimmered like wet obsidian, arranged in ribbed formations that appeared both engineered and organic. The ceiling stretched beyond their lights. Their instruments struggled to map the space, generating ghostly outlines and distortions. In the middle of the cavern floated an object that took the diver's breath away. It hovered weightlessly, its surface rippling like molten silver. It emitted a soft internal glow that shifted through colors in rhythmic pulses. Every pulse matched the signature exactly. The resonance mapper went wild. Data scrolled so fast Evelyn could barely read it. The object was communicating, or at least emitting signals complex enough to resemble communication. The divers felt a strange pressure inside their skulls. Not physical pain, more like the feeling of a thought brushing against their own. A faint whisper echoed through the sub's communication system, though no one had spoken. The whisper came again, melodic, indecipherable, and impossibly close. The object pulsed brighter when they approached. The divers felt an overwhelming mixture of awe and fear wash over them. They were witnessing something ancient, intelligent, and absolutely not of this world. Suddenly, the lights blinked out. Total darkness engulfed them. A piercing sound sliced through the water like a scream of metal. Sparks shot from the instrument panel. Evelyn's heart raced as alarms blared, but then the lights snapped back on. The cavern looked different now, like the walls had shifted while they were blind. The object had also changed. Symbols had appeared across its surface, sharp geometric characters that transformed continuously. The harmonics of the signature rose sharply, almost too intense to bear. The pilot clutched his head, struggling to remain conscious. Debris rumbled above them. A section of the cavern roof cracked, sending fragments crashing into the depths. The water swirled violently. The pilot engaged emergency thrusters to escape, but the object suddenly emitted a beam of concentrated light that struck the cavern floor. The beam carved intricate shapes into the metallic surface, almost like it was printing or activating something hidden. Evelyn stared in disbelief. Whatever the object was, it was awakening. A large chunk of the object's outer layer shattered, breaking off and drifting downward. Evelyn acted on instinct, seizing control of the mechanical arm and grabbing the fragment before it fell out of reach. The moment she secured it, the object dimmed dramatically, like a creature withdrawing into itself. The resonance signature cut out entirely. Silence filled the cavern, an eerie, suffocating silence. The cavern's collapse accelerated. Massive slabs broke free from the ceiling. The pilot shouted as he steered the sub back toward the shaft, dodging falling debris. The entrance rapidly sealed behind them as the chamber caved in completely. Within seconds, it was buried beneath tons of rock. The submersible rocketed upward through churning black water. The fragment glowed inside the mechanical arm, pulsing weakly like a dying ember. The divers didn't speak. They were too stunned, too overwhelmed, too terrified. Strange bioluminescent organisms swarmed around them again, forming spirals, then expanding outward as though guiding their ascent. One of the divers reported a shadow moving just beyond their lights, a long serpentine shape drifting parallel to them. It vanished before anyone else saw it. As they climbed closer to the surface, the fragment grew warm. It pulsed more rapidly, as if sensing distance from its origin. Evelyn kept her eyes on it, unable to shake the feeling that it was watching them in return. They finally breached the surface, and the support vessel rushed to recover them. The sub was lifted aboard, dripping and dented from debris impacts. The crew gathered around in disbelief as the divers emerged, visibly shaken. Evelyn carried the fragment carefully to the onboard lab. Inside the lab, instruments buzzed as the fragment was analyzed. Its structure defied chemistry. It wasn't metal in any conventional sense. It wasn't mineral. It wasn't composite. Even the atomic lattice was unfamiliar, arranged according to geometric ratios found in advanced theoretical physics, but never in earthly materials. The fragment emitted weaker versions of the signature, like a fading signal. But it still pulsed, still shifted, still showed signs of active internal processes. Scientists argued in hushed tones, while military representatives attempted to secure the lab. The tension escalated as the lights flickered and the fragment projected faint holographic shapes onto the walls, symbols identical to those inside the cavern. One researcher recognized a symbol. It matched a classified acoustic anomaly recorded decades earlier during one of the earliest Challenger Deep surveys, an anomaly dismissed as faulty equipment. Now it was clear the signal had been there all along, waiting. Night fell over the vessel, and communication lines filled with bursts of static that matched the fragment's pulse. It was transmitting something, though no one could decode it. Evelyn stood outside on the deck, staring into the black water. She felt certain that the object in the cavern had not shut down. It had simply gone quiet, waiting, listening. Meanwhile, the fragment's pulse synchronized with faint vibrations detected across the Pacific tectonic plates, forming a pattern no one could explain. It was as if the entire ocean floor were responding. The hum inside the lab intensified. The fragment brightened. Symbols flickered rapidly across its surface. Researchers rushed in as the fragment emitted a final pulse that rattled every piece of equipment. And then it stopped. Completely. The lab fell silent. The ocean remained still. The fragment's glow faded to almost nothing. But deep beneath them, far below the reach of any diver, the resonance signature restarted, stronger than before. Evelyn stared at the fresh readings with horror. The signal wasn't coming from the fragment. It was coming from something larger, something waking up, something that had been waiting for them to return, something beneath the Challenger Deep that was no longer dormant. ChatGPT said, "The ocean seemed to hold its breath. Waves lapped gently against the vessel as if nothing had happened, but the instruments continued to hum faintly, picking up irregular vibrations in the deep. Evelyn knew that whatever had been activated in the cavern was now influencing the surrounding waters, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but unmistakably. Inside the lab, the fragment pulsed again, this time with a rhythm slightly different from the initial signature. The sensors tried to decode the patterns, but each analysis yielded only fragments, as if the object's language was too advanced for their understanding. The research team stared at the monitors, mesmerized and frightened. Evelyn traced her fingers over the fragment's smooth surface. It vibrated beneath her touch, warm and alive. She felt the hum resonate through her bones. The thought occurred to her. This was no artifact. It was a living system, one that had been dormant for centuries, waiting for discovery. The military liaison cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Doctor, we need a plan. This object, it's not just scientific. It could be a weapon, or worse." Evelyn did not answer immediately. She was still processing the depth of what they had seen. Outside, the water rippled subtly, responding to an unseen force. Suddenly, the resonance mapper spiked violently. The lab lights flickered. A low-frequency tone filled the room, vibrating through the floor. Every monitor displayed a wave pattern that synchronized with the fragment's pulses. The shape of the waveform was unmistakable, the same geometric pattern seen in the cavern. One of the junior researchers whispered, "It's communicating with something else." No one contradicted him. The thought was impossible, yet the data suggested it was true. The fragment was not isolated. It was part of a network far larger than anyone could imagine. Outside, the night deepened, and the vessel rocked gently on unnaturally still waters. From the horizon, faint glimmers appeared, as if bioluminescent organisms were rising to the surface en masse. Evelyn watched in fascination and unease. The patterns of the organisms mirrored the signals on the monitors. The deep ocean had come alive in response to the fragment. The submersible's instruments, still recording the prior descent, had captured more than just the cavern. Traces in the data hinted at a network of similar structures beneath the Pacific floor, each pulsing faintly, almost like nodes in a giant web. Evelyn's mind raced. This was no simple anomaly. It was a system. A sudden tremor shook the vessel, subtle but unmistakable. The fragment's glow brightened in response, sending rhythmic pulses across the lab. The harmonic patterns overlapped, creating a tone so deep it seemed to resonate with the Earth itself. Evelyn's chest tightened. The signal was spreading. Command on shore demanded updates, but radio communications crackled with static. Even the satellites detected unusual energy readings near the Challenger Deep. The world, unknowingly, was witnessing the awakening of something buried deep beneath the ocean for millennia. Inside the lab, the team debated their next move. Some argued for containment, others for further study. Evelyn realized containment was impossible. The fragment's energy extended beyond the lab, interacting with forces they couldn't control. Every moment they delayed, the network of nodes pulsed stronger. A sudden visual alarm lit up the monitors. Deep-sea pressure sensors hundreds of miles away were spiking in sync with the fragment's pulse. The cavern was no longer just local. Its influence was global. The very seabed seemed to respond to the fragment, sending subtle vibrations up through tectonic plates. Evelyn stared at the monitors in horror. This was no longer a deep-sea mystery. It was a planetary phenomenon. The object was not merely alive. It was aware, active, and expanding its influence beyond the confines of its underwater chamber. Outside the vessel, the water shimmered with strange light patterns, flickering in sync with the fragment's pulse. The bioluminescent organisms swirled around the hull, forming spirals, grids, and lattice-like formations. Each movement seemed deliberate, almost intelligent. Suddenly, the fragment projected a thin beam of light into the air. It hovered above the lab table, creating floating geometric patterns. The shapes twisted, rotated, and reformed continuously. Evelyn tried to record the patterns, realizing that these were not random. They were instructions, or messages. The low hum intensified, vibrating the floorboards. Instruments that had remained silent now whined, displaying data anomalies beyond comprehension. Every electronic device near the fragment experienced fluctuations. The network was waking up, and its reach was growing. Evelyn realized they had underestimated what they had retrieved. The fragment was a key, a single part of a much larger system, and that system was responding to their intrusion. The cavern beneath the Challenger Deep was only the beginning. There were other chambers, other nodes, and all of them were beginning to synchronize. A researcher pointed to the screen, shouting in disbelief, "Look at this! The waveform, it's forming something, like a map." Evelyn leaned in. The combined pulse data from the fragment and prior recordings from the submersible traced lines, curves, and intersections across the ocean floor. The network of nodes was far larger and more intricate than anyone could have imagined. The realization sank in. They were witnessing the activation of a global system, a vast, ancient network lying dormant beneath the seas. It was as if the Earth itself had been holding a secret, waiting for humanity to reach the point where it could interact with it. Evelyn's mind raced through the implications. This network was not natural. Its precision and geometry suggested advanced intelligence, possibly pre-human or something entirely outside known history. It had remained hidden for eons, sealed by the crushing depths of the ocean. The fragment pulsed faster now, sending energy readings spiking off the charts. Alarms blared. The vessel's electronics struggled to stabilize. Every monitor displayed the same sequence, cycling rapidly through previously unseen geometric forms. Outside, the water churned violently, forming patterns on the surface as if the ocean itself was reacting. Bioluminescent formations mirrored the projected symbols. The vessel rocked as the currents intensified, yet the storm was contained to a localized radius. It was not weather, it was influence. The team realized that the system was not dormant, but semi-sentient. It reacted to observation, to proximity, to interference. Their intrusion had triggered an awakening, a sequence that no one could control or predict. Evelyn recorded every detail, knowing these logs could be the only evidence if the system expanded further. Every pulse, every flash of light, every harmonic vibration was a message, a signal, an instruction set beyond human comprehension. Then, without warning, the fragment emitted a sharp pulse of energy that resonated through the entire vessel. The lights flickered violently. Instruments failed. Even the hull seemed to vibrate. It was a force, subtle yet immense, enough to remind them that the deep ocean's pressure was nothing compared to what lay below. The pulse stopped, and silence returned, almost too quickly. But the energy had left a trace. New sensors detected minute changes in the water column, small ripples of heat, current, and magnetic anomalies. The network was now awake, and its reach extended beyond the initial cavern. Evelyn studied the patterns projected by the fragment. The symbols aligned with no known language, but carried mathematical consistency. They were universal, existing in nature, music, and DNA. The object's communication was encoded in a language of pure form and frequency. At dawn, the vessel floated quietly on the surface. The crew was exhausted, mentally and physically, yet the fragment continued its pulse, sending faint, rhythmic signals across the lab. Evelyn realized this was only the beginning. Whatever lay beneath the Challenger deep was awakening, and they had unlocked the first layer of a system older than civilization itself. The military liaison demanded immediate containment, but Evelyn refused. Containment was impossible. The fragment was part of a global system. Its energy was too vast, too connected, to be restricted. Every interaction risked triggering a broader response. That night, the vessel's lights dimmed. The fragment pulsed in the darkness, illuminating the lab with geometric patterns. Outside, the ocean mirrored the pulses, bioluminescent organisms forming grids, spirals, and networks. The system was learning, adapting, responding. Evelyn recorded a message to send to research institutions worldwide. "We have awakened something beneath the ocean," she said. "It is not natural, it is intelligent, and it is beginning to communicate." Her hands trembled as she reviewed the data. This was a message from the deep, and humanity had only begun to understand it. Suddenly, the resonance signature spiked again. Not from the fragment this time, but from the ocean floor. The cavern, or what remained of it, was responding. The network was aligning, synchronizing, preparing. Whatever had been waiting for eons was coming online. The fragment's glow increased, bright enough to cast shadows on the vessel walls. Symbols rotated faster, forming complex three-dimensional patterns. The system's intelligence was evident. It was aware of observation and interaction, and it was beginning to react globally. Outside, the currents began to shift, faint at first, then stronger. The vessel rocked as if the ocean itself was communicating through waves. Evelyn realized that the deep was no longer a silent abyss. It had a voice, a language, and it was being activated by the fragment. The crew stared in awe and terror. No words were spoken. No one dared move. The entire world above the surface remained unaware of what had been triggered beneath. The deep ocean, once a place of mystery, was now alive in a way humanity could neither predict nor control. The fragment pulsed again, projecting light patterns that moved beyond human comprehension. Evelyn documented everything, knowing this would be the most critical discovery in history. They were witnessing intelligence older than time itself, encoded in frequencies and forms that transcended human understanding. The ocean hummed with life. Not the life they knew, but an intelligence embedded in the water, the sediments, the rock. A network of nodes now active, aware, and responsive. Evelyn's heart pounded as she realized that the awakening had only begun. The vessel floated silently as the fragment's glow dimmed slightly, stabilizing. But the low-frequency hum continued, vibrating subtly through the water, through the hull, through the crew. It was a reminder that the system was vast, intelligent, and patient. Evelyn knew that the signal would continue to spread, slowly integrating, interacting, and teaching itself. Humanity had unlocked a layer of the deep ocean never meant to be disturbed. The fragment was just the beginning. Outside, the bioluminescent organisms formed a massive spiral, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the fragment. The pattern was unmistakable. It was a message, a map, and perhaps a warning. The ocean itself had awakened, and it was watching humanity. The resonant signature from the cavern began to pulse again, faint but growing stronger. The fragment responded, amplifying the signal. It was no longer passive. The system had begun to take action. It was alive, aware, and learning. Evelyn stepped back, overwhelmed by the magnitude of their discovery. The ocean had a mind, or at least a network of minds, and they had triggered its awakening. There was no turning back. Humanity had crossed a threshold. The crew remained silent, watching the glowing patterns, feeling the vibrations, hearing the hum. They were witnesses to the birth of a global deep-sea intelligence, something humanity had no power to control. And far below, in the still depths of the Challenger Deep, the network pulsed, a heartbeat awakening after millennia, responding to the touch of explorers who dared to reach the bottom of the world. The system was alive, it was watching, and it was only beginning to move.